sent me a text.
Okay.
Mic up.
What's that? All right, let's call this meeting to order. First, we'll do the invocation. Lord, please watch over us in these troubled times. Help us all to stay healthy and allow us to make the correct decisions that we need to make for the citizens of this fine city. Thank you, O Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We need to do installations of, is it just Bill?
No, I'm gonna review all of them,
Okay.
but I have a sheet right there.
Okay. Installation of officers for year 2020 to 2021. Need somebody to make a motion to nominate me for the board president.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll make a motion that we nominate John Ortworth for vice president. Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And I'll make a motion to nominate Bill Dees as secretary. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And then do we need to nominate John as well? Everybody, okay. Okay. Moving on. Does everybody want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Comments from the audience, and I see John Ling would like to speak.
Thank you. If you'll indulge me, I will take this off while I'm speaking.
John,
Yes,
push the little button there.
the one that's blinking,
Yeah, when it turns green, it's on.
but it doesn't seem like it wants to play with me.
Here it is, it's on.
Okay, all right, all right. I want to take the opportunity to pose a few questions to the board. I'm not putting anybody on the spot. Take your time. Some of this may require the gathering of information or the inquiries of other sorts in order to see if we can find out what happened. But before I do that, and I'm sorry that Brother Zaboni is not here, because the first thing I wanted to say was I believe that all of the citizens of Hannibal, if they pay attention, are really hopeful and rooting for the newly constituted Board of Public Works to kind of take a hold of the situation and operate in a more community responsive and businesslike manner. I don't need to go on and on about some of the things that have had in the past, except to say that we have never had a situation that I know of where the city council got so frustrated with the Board of Public Works, they decided to exercise their authority to declare 2 seats vacant. That's never happened as far as I know. And I would know, I believe. But nonetheless, it's a fresh start, and I think everybody feels like that they want to be able to have confidence that you all who are now sitting in the seats of the Board of Public Works are going to make things a little more in line with what has been in the past and what is expected of you. A lot of this has to do with me trying to find out answers to questions that people pose to me just because they know I've been interested in city government my whole life, participated in it and so on, about what happened with respect to whatever controversy we had about accounting and bookkeeping and budgeting and money over the course of the last 18 months or so. Not ammonia. But as I'm sure everybody is well aware, something went wrong, and we lost our general manager, and then I don't know what all took place. The Board of Public Works hired a very expensive St. Louis law firm to make a study. Then the police were involved to do some sort of investigation. And then we got to the point where we hired a firm called Brown Smith Wallace, maybe Brown Smith Wallace and Associates or something else, that were supposed to find out what went wrong. And then we had Stowe Utilities come in here to advise the Board of Public Works how they should be the Board of Public Works. All of this, as best I can tell, has totaled up to at least $250,000 over what, according to, I think the news release we got, was the loss of $12,000. Well, that's going to cause people to ask questions. And so here I am to ask a few of them myself. The first one is, were the contracts, whether oral or written, with the law firm of Jackson Lewis, the company of Brown Smith Wallace, and Stowe Utilities submitted to the City Council for approval? Now, you might know that right off the top of your head. I don't. I'm paying attention to, as I do to at least the agenda of the City Council. I don't know that they were. All three of those were contracts that wound up being for more than $10,000. And if it's more than $10,000, Charter Section 11.08 says it must be approved by the City Council. I would just offer this, if perhaps you get into a situation where you hire somebody and you're going to pay them, and they're going to do work for you, and you don't know exactly the extent of that work or the cost of it, I think you have an obligation to say, you got to stop at $10,000. Or if you know right now you're going to go over $10,000, we need to know because we got to go downtown and get our approval. That's question number one. Question number two, did the City Council approve retaining Jackson Lewis as special or additional legal counsel for the City Board of Public Works? Now, this question has to do with Chapter 10.04 of the City Charter, which gives the authority for hiring additional legal help for the City of Hannibal exclusively to the City Council. I have read more than once the chapter on the Board of Public Works and the chapter on the Department of Law. And I can find nothing in there that permits anybody but the City Council to hire additional lawyers to represent the City of Hannibal. So that's another question. If that wasn't done, we need to find out where the authority of the Board of Public Works to hire a St. Louis lawyer comes from, what limits it may have, etc. And this is the one I'm going to maybe go into a little deeper. I'm interested in knowing what was the nature of the budget or accounting problem that escaped the review of the city auditor, Wade, Stable, Schanbacher, and Walker, and the board's certified public accountant, finance director. That's troubling because, let me follow up with my next question. Does the board comply with the requirements of Charter Provisions 11.11 and 11.12? And if you'll bear with me, that has to do with your bookkeeping. I read in part from 11.11. The Board of Public Works shall, quote, cause to be kept books of account showing with entire accuracy contemporaneous current entries of receipts, expenditures, and inventories of the board, and preserve in its office duplicate vouchers for all expenditures. Now, The word on the street is you guys have issued somewhere between 30 and 40 credit cards. Well, I'm not exactly sure that would comport with this. It would seem excessive without regard to language in the city charter. But in 12, it says, this is purchasing procedure, 1112, the board shall cause to be established, adopted, and used a procedure for purchasing, employing the use of requisitions, written purchase orders, and audit of accounts as near such procedure adopted by the city for other departments as may be practical. Now, obviously, we kind of somehow drifted away from that. But if you spend a nickel, it's supposed to be written down somewhere. You're not supposed to make any purchases without a purchase order or a voucher or some other record that shows who was authorized, what was purchased, and what it was used for. And you shouldn't have any question as to whether or not purchases made on credit accounts within the community or outside the community, whether or not whatever was purchased found its way back to the inventory of the Board of Public Works. And so that's something that I'm interested in. How well do we comply with those provisions? Now, in trying to find out some answers to the questions that are asked of me from time to time, I have submitted requests to examine certain records of the Board of Public Works, and my success has been mixed. And I will say at the outset, although I can do it, it is not my purpose or desire to sue the city of Hannibal over failure to provide records as required under the open meetings law and open records law. Cost you all money, cost me time and headache. I would rather not do that, but I will, if that's the only way to find out what goes on within the Board of Public Works. Now, let me give you an example here. I asked for to review the bill submitted by the lawyers at Jackson Lewis starting at January 1, 1917. Well, we didn't get quite back that far, but we got back into 2018, and this is an example of what I got. I got some pretty heavily redacted documents. I'm not going to this is just a few samples of the more egregious ones. Now, these right here have to do with a bill of $18,551 for 1 month, I think it was. Of course, that in and of itself would violate the charter as far as contracts are concerned. But here's the question I got. Mr. Lemon, we discussed it, and he told me that in these bills that there were names of employees and the interest in preserving the privacy of personnel records and personnel matters before the Board of Public Works, that they would be redacted. And I believe I told him, my thinking was, that's okay with me. I'm not interested in reading anybody's names in these bills if they refer to an individual employee. But as you've seen here, there's stuff where, for example, here's just 1 hour and a half of Mr. Miller, or Ms. Miller maybe, conference with client Ray, blank, review of material Ray, blank. Conference with B. Stewart regarding blank. That's not redacting an employee's name. That's redacting what they did. Now, here's the other curious thing that came to me in ordinary course of trying to work this out. Mr. Lemon didn't make these redactions, as far as I can tell. And I'm sure our new general manager didn't make them. And I'm fairly confident the issue did not come before this board. This board being, if it's legal, the client of this law firm. So my advice was that one of the lawyers at this firm, Ms. Brundridge, I think, that she was the one who took it upon herself without direction to black out everything that she did for the Board of Public Works, along with the other lawyers down there. that makes me think that this is not a personnel matter. This is not a matter of redacting things that are lawfully kept secret from the public and the people that own this municipal utility. It's my suspicion that she wanted to redact that on behalf of the law firm because what they were doing was kind of making saps out of the former board and running up the bill. And if we could read this, we'd all know. Well, you've got them. And nobody can tell the four of you that you can't read them. And I'm sure that there's not going to be anybody tell your general manager that he can't read it. So if you get the chance, take a look at it for me. And there may be others. And in closing, let me just acquaint you with another provision that's in old Charter Chapter 11, Section 11. It says there, all records of the Board of Public Works shall be open to the council and city manager, comma, and to the public. So the charter of the city of Hannibal is more generous to someone wanting to look at municipal records than Chapter 610 of the state statutes. And I believe, I don't take this to the bank, double check me with Mr. Lemon or whoever else you might want to. I think that that chapter of our state code provides that any subdivision of the state of Missouri, municipal corporation, county, district, what have you, has the right to adopt a more generous public records action or statute, ordinance, what have you, than is in the state code. Might be wrong on that, but as Bill Partee used to say, I'm not apt to be. So I want you to take a look at that, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave a copy of these questions with your general manager, because like I say, I don't expect anybody to speak up right now and say, oh, John, we know all about that, and we've delved into it, so on and so forth, but I think all these are something that you ought to look at, and if you will indulge me, I'm going to make room for the next guy to have that chair. I will conclude my comments, and I will go on and about my business. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you.
Thank you, John.
And nice to meet you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we will move on to regular reports. Mr. Reesner?
Okay. First off, I'd like to express my appreciation for everybody wearing face masks today. I think it's the right thing to do. We're actually going to be implementing face mask requirements for the employees in all common areas for their safety and wellness. We've already done that pretty much for the folks that have to share a crew truck. That's been going on for a couple of months. But we just felt like it was important for the safety of the public and safety of you guys and setting a good example for employees that any shared space or common space that we'd be complying with the face mask. Over the last few months, we've been kind of looking at stagger shifts and remote working as we may head into the fall schedule. And I know everybody's been seeing the information on the school systems and how they're going to go back to school. But we've kind of been looking at the capabilities of our information systems, IT equipment and phone system on how we might be able to operate if we do have another pandemic or outbreak where people would have to work remotely. As of July 15th, the one thing we did, we were one of the last utilities to implement it, but the disconnect policy for non-payment went back into full force. So we've been doing an extensive outreach with customers and trying to work with them to make payment arrangements, and that's been going well. I think the one thing I wanted to do is remind the board that, under the extreme weather clause, anything over 90 degrees in the months of June through August, we're not able to do disconnects, and anything under 32 degrees in October and March, we cannot do disconnects. The other thing, I was wanting to bring up is we're kind of really looking at utilizing our information systems. So we've been going through a lot of work to streamline processes improvements, enhance overall internal controls. We've been working a lot on online training, review of policies and operating procedures. That's all a part of this initiative, and kind of focusing on the accounting and customer information systems and procurement processes. So that's one of the items that's underway. Next month we'll be bringing amendments to the schedule of fees and charges for the board's approval, and they're kind of isolated around 3 items: the transfer fee, the recycling fee, and then we've been looking at deposits based on credit checks. The NISC system can actually interface with Equifax, and so costs about $2 per check. But if people have good credit quality, we wouldn't require a deposit, then adjust it accordingly. So we're under review and looking at that and seeing how we might go about implementing a credit check for deposits and being more customer-friendly in that realm. On July 21st, the city staff will be recommending to City Council a change in auditors from to Williams Keepers. They just went through the recent RFP process, and as far as I can tell, that's a City Council decision, so they'll be making the approval, and we're supportive of this decision. And the impact to HBPW is going to be about the same. You know, anytime you make changes to auditors, it's going to take a little bit more work and documents prepared by clients, but that's going to go to the City Council tomorrow night. The other thing we were wanting to highlight is as we continue to see power supply costs go down, actually MISO saw record low prices for wholesale energy, and that's been a good thing for the customers. You know, we'll get into the financial reporting here in a little bit, but overall electric revenue requirements are down about 3 or 4%. We're actually seeing wholesale prices decline for our entire portfolio from about $62 to $58. That represents about a 6.8% decrease, and so the customers are already seeing that a little bit. And then that's kind of driven by more kind of economical dispatch within the system. Natural gas prices are down 24% for the year, which most of the wholesale market is being based upon natural gas pricing. And really MISO's not seeing the transmission constraints that they've seen. So this is a continued trend of the things that we've seen for the last 4 or 5 months. In the week of June 22nd, Vanner was in, and they were actually doing their yearly maintenance of all submersible pumps. So they went through all the lift stations, pump houses, water treatment plants, and wastewater treatment plants, and did their maintenance and pulled each pump, complete electrical checks and complete visual inspections, tolerance oil changes. And that all goes extremely well, just part of the annual maintenance program that we have in place for some of our higher dollar pieces of equipment. The one thing we're going to really focus on a little bit today, and you saw on your agenda, where Andrea is going to be presenting on the MS4 compliance and stuff, but kind of a new fiscal year, new day. We were able to, during the budgeting process, isolate about $1.5 million. So we're going to loan that from the electric fund over to stormwater initiatives. Kind of within that $1.5 million, we've got North Street budgeted, we've got Union Street budgeted, we've got Martin Street budgeted within there, and we're going to try to address those projects over the next 12 to 18 months. MS4 compliance is a part of this, and then the other thing we're going to try to get done is an entire assessment of the stormwater system to see where maybe some of the issues are that's outstanding out there. So there's going to be a pretty big initiative going on that front. Back in 2018, there was already $1 million loaned from the electric system to the stormwater to start doing some initiatives. There's about $250,000 left over in that funding. So really going into this fiscal year, we've got about $1.8 million available to address some stormwater items. We're putting the list of projects together now. So I'm kind of hoping between $300,000 and $400,000 may be available to do some other projects, not just the ones that I just referenced. So that's all going on, and then that kind of moves us into a little bit on the operations report. And Andrea's actually been with HBPW since 2016. She's the stormwater coordinator, so she's been assigned to make sure we're in compliance with MS4, and she's doing a really good job with it. It's been a difficult situation to find the funding and to address these initiatives. I think we've got a good plan moving forward over the next 12 to 24 months to kind of get some things done. Come October of 2021, we're going to have to be in compliant with all the MS4 items that she's going to be highlighting today. But Andrea also organizes the clean stream teams and stuff, and reaches out to the community on a lot of the things that she does. She's got a Bachelor's of Science degree in interdisciplinary studies from Central Methodist University, and she's currently pursuing her master's in public affairs from Mizzou. If you've been around her very much, you recognize how excited she is about the Hannibal community and how hard she works for the community. She serves on several boards throughout the area. So I'm going to kind of ask her to come up and address the MS4 compliance and kind of update and educate all of us on what's going to be required of us before October of 2021. So Thank you, Andrew. Yeah.
How are you, Andrea?
Good. Thank you guys for letting me speak today. This is green, so that means it's on, right?
Yeah, he didn't shut it off.
Okay, just making sure because I didn't hit anything. Sorry.
I forgot about that.
At least it wasn't password. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't password. There weren't enough of a.
I had to play nice with password.
Okay, so as Ken said, my focus today is going to be kind of discussing the MS4 permit itself. This is a very high-level overview of kind of the history of where the MS4 permit comes from, and then different regulatory objectives that are outlined in the permit. And in the coming months, when we're talking about stormwater, you guys kind of have a foundation to refer back to, knowing exactly why we're making the decisions and recommendations that we are. So a lot of times when you hear about stormwater management, you think about quantity. There's actually two areas that effective stormwater management programs focus on. The first is quantity and then quality. So like I said earlier, quantity is what we usually know. It's the failing infrastructure that we have throughout the city. That's the focus on the infrastructure's ability to move water as efficiently and effectively to protect public safety. The quality side is actually what the MS4 permit focuses on. It's what are the environmental impacts of the stormwater runoff that goes back into the environment. So you'll kind of see as I go along here to know exactly where the stormwater management plan comes from. There's federal regulation, state regulation, and then our local regulation. So this is just a little bit of history as far as federal regulation goes. In 1972, the Clean Water Act was created, the NPDES. They recognize two different types of pollutants. You have your point source pollutants and then non-point source. Your point sources are basically industries that have a pipe that discharges into the environment. So our water treatment plant has a point source as well as our wastewater. And those were the only thing that was regulated in the beginning. Then a decade or so later, EPA realized that these non-point source pollutants, they're harder to identify because they have multiple diffuse sources. It's actually everything that stormwater carries. When it rains, stormwater picks up anything, and it just follows the natural flow of water. So the EPA realized that this is a significant issue that needs to be addressed. So in 1990, they started regulating, it's called Phase 1, so medium to large cities. Any cities with 100,000 population or more had to start putting different measures in place to control the non-point source pollutants. And then in 1999, in Clean Water Act NPDES implemented Phase 2, small MS4s, and that is where Hannibal falls. So then kind of filtering down, EPA sets forth their regulations, and then it comes down to the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. They have approximately 150 MS4s with the population between 1,000 and 100,000, and all of those MS4s are covered under the Master General Permit. Going down to the local level, the permit for the MS4s requires the development and implementation of a formal written stormwater management plan. And again, it focuses solely on the quality of stormwater. So to kind of go over recent history, the current state regulation is everyone falls under this Master General Permit, where at the local level we write a stormwater management plan based off of 6 different minimum control measures. And with your guys' paperwork, you'll see this is a pre-public notice draft of the next permit. Previous to this permit, we were told you have 6 different minimum control measures, and we want you to reduce non-point source pollutants following these suggestions, but not necessarily giving us specific direction. This next permit actually gives specific direction. Instead of kind of having you write your own, it outlines almost like a menu of you can do this or this, but you have to make sure you do this, et cetera. So it's actually going to become a little bit more stringent. And then I have noted a specific date here was the 2016 EPA remand rule. Basically what happened was the EPA set forth these standards saying cities need to follow these non-point source pollutant recommendations in order to reduce these pollutants. But what they found was cities were writing a stormwater management plan, but there wasn't any enforcement mechanism. So the EPA said, states, you need to start auditing your MS4s, which we did have one of our first audits last year. Even though the MS4 coordinator hasn't given us a review and rating. So there was a disconnect between at the state, we would submit our stormwater management plan. We're still waiting on that recommendation, but then we're being audited for what we put in the plan that hasn't been approved. So it gets kind of confusing for us MS4. So this next permit I kind of alluded to earlier, it's the easiest way they could think of to make sure that all MS4s were meeting the minimum, except practicable to be in regulation. So now that this is a little bit of history for you, I'm going to go through the minimum control measures that we have to meet. There are 6 different ones of them, and you'll see as I go through that it's actually an iterative approach to where there's a lot of overlap between the different control measures. And as I said earlier, this is kind of a high-level overview. So if you have a specific question over what we're doing or what we need to be doing, let me know. For the minimum control measure, number 1 is public education outreach. The main objectives of the minimum control measures are listed above, but it's basically to educate the community of the pollution potential from common activities. What we currently are doing, we maintain a dedicated spot on our website about stormwater pollution and how to reduce it. We have monthly social media posts that we make. We do press releases twice a year, and then educational presentations as well. Public involvement and participation is another minimum control measure that we have a lot of have had success with these past few years. And basically, it's giving opportunities for citizens to participate in reducing these stormwater pollutants. One of the big ones is having a public meeting for your stormwater management plan. That's the best way is to get public input, is to put that plan out in public and then ask for any feedback. And then the second one, we actually have been able to utilize the State Stream Team program. It's a free program where they send us supplies for each cleanup we have. So trash bags, gloves, and t-shirts. And we ask the public to come and help us. Usually it's along Bear Creek, but it's really any city right-of-way, especially if it's in a stream corridor, that we can then in turn report the activity back to the State Stream Team, and we get credit per se for doing so. Okay, so moving on to these next minimum control measures, this is where a lot of change is going to be happening in the next few years. The main part of the minimum control measure number 3 is to have and maintain a storm sewer map. So Joe has actually played a really important role in identifying all of our stormwater structures that are out there. The way that we actually will use this map for our illicit discharge detection program is all of our outfalls have been identified. And we will have to develop an inspection program to go out during a dry weather and inspect these outfalls. if there's any type of liquid coming from that outfall, we'll have to have a plan on tracking down where that's coming from, because in theory, it's dry outside, there shouldn't be any fluid coming out of these outfalls. So that's where things are going to get expensive. We're going to have the need for an inspector to do this, equipment to go up the outfall to trace and then any equipment to eliminate that source. And then, of course, there is the actual regulatory mechanism. The city of Hannibal right now does not have an illicit discharge ordinance. So we will be working to develop an ordinance along with that inspection program so that when we find an illicit discharge, we will go back to the citizen and have them basically eliminate that illegal discharge. And then, of course, we'll develop enforcement procedures to go with that as well. So this when you're looking at the permit, it starts on page 13, the illicit discharge. Minimum control measure number 4 is construction site stormwater control. This is actually similar to number 3 in the sense that we have to develop an ordinance. Here at the local level, we don't necessarily have any construction site requirements. We have multiple options here, but essentially what we will need to do is develop an ordinance that, and we do have one where they review the construction site plans, but we don't necessarily have the procedure, the follow-up to make sure that they have a stormwater pollution prevention plan in place. So our inspection program will outline what needs to happen. Say we have a rain event that's determined through the program, say it's 1 inch or every 7 days, just depending on how we decide to write it, as long as we meet at minimum the state requirements. We'll go out to these construction sites, review their SWIP, that pollution prevention plan I mentioned, and make sure that they have all of the BMPs in place to reduce that pollution. So the picture that I have up there, I put it up there just to kind of help demonstrate exactly what I'm talking about. You have like a gravel drive for trucks that are coming off of the construction so that there's less sediment on their tires, and then the curb there, so that we reduce the amount of dirt that comes on the street, because once that rains, we don't want it to enter our waters. And then, of course, your silt fences. So along with that ordinance, we'll, of course, need enforcement procedures to be developed as well. Minimum control measure number 5 is the post-construction stormwater management. So you'll kind of see a trend here on this one as well. We need to have an ordinance developed to address post-construction runoff at new developments, and then the program that establishes adequate long-term operation and maintenance of these structural and non-structural BMPs. Basically what that means is if a new subdivision is built or an area is redeveloped, whatever, we want to make sure that they have a long-term stormwater BMP put into place, whether it's a detention basin or some other structural BMP that helps reduce water quality impacts. And again, costs associated with that are going to be inspectors and training, and then, of course, the development of the program. Number 6 is good housekeeping / pollution prevention in municipal activities. This one right here is actually a combination of all of the other minimum control measures, making sure that municipal employees are adhering to all of the other minimum control measures and the measurable goals that we have in place throughout the permit. Basically, if we are asking our citizens to do these things, we as a city are also doing these things. So it'll be a matter of involving them in the education, in the sense we'll have a training program for them. And it really is that training goes hand in hand with illicit discharge. We want our employees, whether they're BPW employees or police officers or street department guys, parks guys, if they see something running down the street going into an inlet, they can help us identify those illicit discharges so that we can go back to tracing that and eliminating it from the environment. Of course, we'll have measures in place for construction site stormwater runoff control and post-construction management as well. So, I kind of mentioned this earlier. The next permit cycle, this is the pre-public draft, which is she said it's the pre-public notice draft, but it goes public notice this month. And so we'll actually be attending a virtual public meeting on July 30th to go over the permit. This is the third draft of the permit. So what you're seeing is going to be essentially the next permit. And one thing that it does outline for us, it gives us specific dates on when we need certain things accomplished. So I talked about different things that we already do for public education and outreach and involvement and things that we're doing well. And there are many things that we're doing well within the expectations of the program. But with that being said, this next permit, there are inadequacies that we have to get up to date with, and these are kind of outlined here. Within the first year of the permit, we will need to have that ordinance and enforcement plan for the illicit discharge detection and elimination. We'll have to have that established and going by September 30th, 2022, along with the construction. Any construction that's going on will have to have an ordinance addressing their potential construction runoff, pollutants, and the permitting and review procedures associated with the inspection program. And then within the first 2 years of the permit, so we have 1 year past that date, we will have established our post-construction ordinance and inspection program. And that one is actually going to be fairly challenging because we have different standards based on different times throughout Hannibal's history, essentially, of what post-construction BMPs look like as far as stormwater management. So we do have about 100, I'd say, scanned locations throughout town of what was once approved during the construction period of the subdivision or street. And so we'll go through and identify who is responsible for those BMPs and be in touch with them as to make sure that they're in long-term compliance with what the original plan stated. So again, everything that we are to develop through these programs also goes back to public education outreach. So you can see that that's going to be another challenge as we move forward, is to not only educate our citizens of the risks involved in, let's say right now we're really good at explaining litter, we are going to expand that into the risk of dumping things down your storm drain and your construction, what's required, and then of course maintaining those BMPs. Any questions? It's a lot of information, so.
Any questions? From anybody else in the room?
Comment and a question. The comment is planning and zoning, stormwater is planned for by a city appointed engineer on all the new, plans for subdivisions and so forth.
It is, and sorry I didn't say that specifically. This actually takes into consideration stormwater quality controls.
Okay.
So we do have the ordinance already as far as drainage and stormwater BMPs, but not necessarily taking in that quality that has to.
Okay. And then question, what's been a problem in the past was sump pumps from different homes going in the sanitary sewer system. Question, would they be permitted to go into the stormwater system?
Yeah.
And then when you're out looking during dry periods, if you've got a home that's below the water table, those could be pumping within those storm sewers, and you're still gonna have, outfall.
Sure. So that is basically essentially rainwater that's coming into the system and that is being pumped out. If that's coming through an outfall during one of our dry weather inspections, we actually will have outline parameters on testing whatever's coming through. So if we test it and there aren't any specific pollutants that we're concerned about, then we can kind of rule that out. But let's say that it's like a green liquid coming through, or absolutely. And so we'll go through as we're designing the program to identify higher risk areas, and most of those areas are actually going to be ones that maybe have they're not sanitary sewer areas, so they run risk of actual sanitary sewer being in the storm sewer. So that's kind of where we'll start, and we'll be able to identify that.
Find coliforms or.
Exactly. We'll be able to identify that through the testing.
Okay,
So
thank you.
you're welcome.
Just an observation, it's a question, it's whether or not there is an ordinance. I noticed just this week out on Veterans at West Ely, a lot of construction traffic debris, if you will. Is there ordinance in effect currently to mitigate that?
So with the construction requirements, there is actually at the state level, they have to have a permit for anything over 1 acre. But as far as the enforcement of that requirement, there really isn't any at this point.
We're not up to speed there.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
At this point, it has to come from the building inspector's office.
That's a discussion.
That's the way
Yeah.
it was discussed when
Okay.
Jeff was here.
Okay. But we're gonna more transition toward, you, I'm hearing, or someone,
We don't know yet.
okay.
It becomes an issue of citation and stuff of that nature. So it's something we're gonna have to work out moving forward. 'Cause
Okay. Yeah.
Have to go to city court and all that.
Target, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Andrea, can I try to get an understanding of this permit that's required by October of 2021?
Yes.
Is it mainly just a approval of the processes and ordinances that are in place, and that's what the permit is? It's basically an approval of the administration that you've done so far, and no real inspection or final outflow testing?
The permit that goes into effect next October is basically prior to this permit, we would write our own stormwater management plan and say we are going to put this measurable goal into place by 2020, and there really wasn't ever any. In theory, there should have been a review and rating at the state level, but they had some employee overturned down there and different reasons that we never actually were reviewed and rated. So this permit is actually looking different in the sense that they're telling us what we can do. We're going to submit a plan that says, okay, yes, we're going to be doing this, versus in the past, nothing necessarily was ever followed through with the
So
plan.
the permit is really just the approval of the plan you're putting together?
Well, the approval comes separate, but the permit itself is more of an outline on what we have to do. Does that make sense? So,
So they say you have to do X, Y, Z. You say, okay, we're going to do X, Y, Z, so that gives us the permit.
yes.
Okay.
It basically puts us in compliance with the permit.
And what
And-
we say is going to happen.
Yes, and it's kind of challenging with stormwater because
Oh, yeah.
every city is different as far as how far along they are in this. So one thing with us, along with other cities in the state, is this is going to give us the base, the base level of what they expect of our program. I ideally, or in some cities, this is the base. And since you've done this, now you're going to do this. And it's just an iterative process to where you're continually improving your program and focusing on different goals.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, we just really wanted to give you a background of the MS4 because you hear that so much and what we have to do over the next year or two. And then Matt's got some of his operational items coming up. So he's actually going to hit on some projects that's related to stormwater as well. So
Good.
First project I want to update you all on is the water plant GAC project. Contractors been in addressing issues, punch list items before we close that out. They've been waiting on the construction of some HVAC ductwork that is supposed to be in sometime this week, and so their subcontractor will be up next week completing that installation, and that will be the last major construction milestone. On the Die Maker's tank rehabilitation, that's a project that we had approved, or the board had approved back in January. The complete painting of the interior, a blast and paint of the exterior of the tank out there behind what's Spartan Light Metal Products now off of Highway MM. That was originally supposed to start back in March, but due to the whole COVID deal, it was delayed. They started about the last week of June. They've got the exterior blasted. The interior is drained. They're going to start blasting and painting it once they get another crew finished with a different tank. And so within the next week or so, they should be going on that. By payment, they're roughly 40% done on that project. So we have a pretty tight time schedule. We'd like to have the water out of that tank as little as possible because that is our only tank in that pressure zone. So to help combat that, we also brought in roughly 50,000 gallons of hydropneumatic storage, placed at different points out there in that pressure zone. Just gives us less pressure swings from working off of our pumps. And so all in all, that's going well. With most of our I&I projects, with the rain that we've been having, we've been seeing some issues. So we got some ideas on things to follow up with once we get caught up on some other construction items. But especially the Patchen Street lift station area, we had high flows for a period of time, especially with that rain we had. I think it was June 30th. It actually resulted in a couple SSOs in that area, and the main staying full for a period of time. This is an area we targeted, 8 or so years ago. We had the whole area smoke tested. We didn't have any issues for a few years, and now all of a sudden things are coming back. So we're going to start looking for sump pumps. We do know we have some manholes that are old rock laid up ones. So this winter we're going to target replacement of those, and so that we can hopefully tighten up the system to where we're not seeing those high flows reflected into our lift station. On storm sewer, Martin Street, that project is out for bid. We're taking bids the 5th. I forget now. 5th of August, 10 a.m. here. Roughly about a $450,000 total project cost. That is with replacement of the water and sewer lines included in it. So estimates are down around upper twos, I think, on storm sewer alone. So hopefully have those bids. Hopefully we receive some good bids, have them reviewed, and have them ready for to present to you to award one of the contractors at the next board meeting. So
Very good.
North Street storm sewer. Again, we've issued award of a contract back in March to Heartland Restoration out of Ellsbury to complete a temporary repair. That's basically to go in and tighten up the interior of approximately 250 feet of the stone laid up archway. Due to the river levels, we've been unable to get the contractor in there to do that. We're hoping, we're talking, maybe next week he can get in there and get that done. The river level's dropping off pretty quick, and it'll be approaching 12 feet next week. So that'll allow him to get in there and complete that. Take roughly a week to complete. The way I see it is it's a good insurance policy because if a river comes back up, we could be in flooding season again next spring without being able to complete a permanent repair. So, and again, that is it's a project that we submitted information to FEMA to get reimbursement. So 75-80% of that should be eligible for reimbursement. We've also worked with the Corps of Engineers on what type of project they're going to do. They're around North Street. Early last month, they finally made a determination that they're going to extend the concrete box structure that goes through the levee. They're going to extend it to the west out to about the east edge of Bridge Street. That'll give us a connection point there that we can then move forward with designing and installation of the permanent repair further west, hopefully up to the old bridge approach. Was the plan that we're moving forward with at this point. And it's looking like they'll be complete with their plan toward the end of August, 1st September, sometime in there, and then they had to go out for bids and get a contractor on board. So I don't know if they'll be able to get anything moving before next spring's flood season or not, or if it'll be something that'll be delayed until probably this time next year. So,
Man, would that project include disturbing the levee itself?
The core project, maybe a little bit. I don't think that box culvert extends out totally past the toe of the levee, so there may be 10 or 15 feet that they may have to disturb right there.
Okay. The downtown people, they'll freak out, but.
Yeah. Again, all I've seen from them is 65% drawings, so
Okay.
it didn't show exactly where they were tying into. They'll bring in earth and fill and backfill all over that eastern portion of North Street as well. So.
Okay, thank you.
And then later in the meeting, we got a approval of a contract allowing PSBA to proceed with the design of the remaining portion of the North Street replacement. And then as far as electric projects go with the tie line, we're moving forward with Barnes Henry on laying out the routing of that project. And I know Jerry's got some more information to provide later. So.
Can I ask you something about the North Street? When the temporary fix, or I don't know if you call it temporary, but the Band-Aid fix, I'm not trying to call it anything other than what it is. Will it look to the casual observer that the street's open, fences are all down, and you can drive on it and use it, or will it stay in the state that it's in? I just don't happen to know what.
It might clean it up some.
Plan is.
I doubt we'll ever take the fences totally down, especially on that eastern portion, but it may make it appear that Bridge Street is more open than it presently is. Just because we don't know if there's voids under that eastern portion or not.
Oh, I got you. Good.
And so we don't want to introduce any more weight to that area than we need to. So
Okay.
but definitely it'll tidy it up some. The contractor is going to come in and remove a section of the street that's in that fenced off portion. They're going to break a hole in the top of the storm sewer to allow them to get materials in, but also provides them a second exit should something go wrong, rather than just the gate well. And then once they get the reinforcing mat pinned to the walls and the concrete poured, then they'll reform that top and pour it as well. And then it'll just be graveled area at that point.
The visual, and I'm sure it affects downtown folks, as that construction activity goes on, is there a way to screen that off, besides just typical chain link fence stuff? So, because it sounds like we're going to be looking at a couple of years here at least. Is that correct?
I mean, we could look at some other type of
Just, just so that the public doesn't have to see all the construction activity during festival kind of things and access,
Well, I mean,
limiting access.
once the temporary repair is going to be there a week and gone. These larger repairs, you're not going to screen them off
Just going to be
because
too
it's
big.
the equipment that they're going to have there and the access that they're going to have. It's going to be too big to screen off. So.
Because you'll get some blowback with downtown folks, I'm sure. But it is what it is.
I mean, we can work with the contractors, whomever they may be, to help, tidy up the site, get them, their materials compact as possible, get their equipment, maybe move to some other locations so that we still have access to downtown during some of these festivals and such. So.
And I think the merchants understand that, it's a project going on that's going to ensure, that they stay
Long-term.
dry. So I think
It's
they're
a
patient with
necessity
it.
too, yes.
I mean,
I understand.
the first one with the core is going to be a small inconvenience. When we talk about replacement of the remaining portion, that's going to be a big inconvenience because it's going to require
It's going to be
North
ugly
Street
for
to
a
be
while.
closed down.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take planning and a lot of staging to get completed. So
Bill, what you're asking, and I think I'm asking the same thing, I just want to be clear. When this construction is finished, that's going to take a week or two, what do you expect it to look like? Will it be a sidewalk over top and no street, or will it be bushes planted, or?
it'll be gravel instead of the jumbled concrete that's presently there.
And just something to keep the heavy traffic off of it?
Yeah, and the fences will remain in place. So,
And since they'll be remaining in place, I think where Bill might have been going and where I was asking is, will it end up looking like a construction zone for the next 2 years? Or like, I think you've already mentioned, you might look at prettying it up somehow so that
Yeah,
people
we
walk
can
by
work
don't
with,
actually notice that it's an unfinished deal.
yeah, we can work with Parks and Rec and get maybe some more of the area mowed and allow them access to do that, and then we can look at some other ways to maybe screen it off.
Now, there are banner, billboard type materials that can be put on fences to screen that off that look appropriate. You can do Hannibal, whatever, Mark Twain stuff. If it's a long-term construction activity, it doesn't cost a lot of money to print those up now compared to what they used to. It's just that kind of concern. How's the public going to see that for maybe a 2-year period? Is that,
Yeah, that's where I was kind of going, and then kind of you.
it's a little bit of marketing there.
You might even
look at
visit
that.
on, there's actually going to be 3 projects. You're going to have the temporary repair, the Corps is going to be in there doing their work, and then we'll come in and do our work. So there's going to be quite a bit of activity going on over the next 12 to 24 months, and I don't know, have we visited with the Corps too much on how they're going to stage their equipment to get in there and get out? And
We've identified some areas that the city owns that they could use as staging areas. So,
yeah.
One dumb question. When the water goes from that North Street box, what do we call it, culvert box, to the river, what keeps the river from coming back the other direction?
nothing.
So when the flood wall's up, the river can actually come back underneath the flood wall?
Correct. That's why it blew up last year because it was over 25 feet, and we were directed to close that gate structure.
Oh, so there's a gate somewhere.
There is a gate there, but normally until it's 25 feet, it was open. With this new design, the concrete box will be able to withstand the pressure of the river water backing into it, plus draining all the water down Mark Twain Avenue. And so we shouldn't have to close that gate structure, and that gate structure would be used in emergencies only to where river was backing in and there was a failure of some sort that required us to shut that to keep flooding from happening.
When the levee was built, all the connections to that box were disconnected up to Highway 79, basically. So all that was isolated, and new inlets were put in place that go down to your pump station down by the old hotel. So yeah, so the river can back up, but it has to back up above the levee before it would spill out of the inlet. But that pressure is what caused the failure of the stone archway. so to speak.
With all of that activity, I would suggest some real coordination with all of the adjacent property owners before.
Yeah.
In other words, people don't know, what they don't understand, they criticize. And, it's pretty easy to put that fire out if you talk to them first before you start digging.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, we're, on our portion of the project, we're probably at least a year out.
Yeah.
Time we get it designed, get contracts, bid and awarded, and then get to a point at which the river's at a level that we can actually get in there and do something, so.
Thank you.
Anything else, ma'am?
No, that's all I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Financial report?
Yeah, we're in the process of filling the director of finance, so I'll be excited when we can get to the other side. We've actually conducted interviews and excited about the candidates, so we're moving kind of forward with it. And I think the one thing I want to stress is that actually this month's financials are actually year-end financials. So I do want to stress that they're unaudited financial statements, and this is what will ultimately end up in the annual report. So most of the information I'm going to present is actually year-over-year or fiscal year and budget numbers comparisons, so you guys have an idea of how the entire fiscal year went. Really, overall, everything was extremely positive compared to the budget, and then even compared to last year's financials, we saw improvements in most of our key performance indicators. And the one good thing about it is that even though revenues were down 3% over last year's revenues and actually 4% compared to the budget, which is a really good thing for our customers, because of the power supply costs that we referenced in the prior operation and general manager's report, our expenses were down as well. So we're actually seeing net income for all the funds actually up 6% over last year and up 24% compared to the budget. And like I said, most of that's going to kind of reside within the electric system. But we also saw some positive things within the water system as well, where revenues year over year was up about 2%. Expenses remained flat. We're still kind of working through the GAC project and getting it calibrated and see how we're going to operate with it. So this next fiscal year will be another good test of what our expenditures will look like going forward. But we actually saw a 17% increase in net income year over year and a significant increase over the budget. And a couple of that was with Public Water Supply District. They were going to be off the system a couple months earlier than what they ended up was able to achieve. So we had some revenues that came in from that agreement for a couple of months. So financial performance compared to budget was really good. Financial performance compared to year over year was positive. Positive thing for the customers. As you remember, we deferred the 3.5% rate increase for the water fund, and right now all the data looks like it's going to justify that. So hopefully we'll keep a close look on it and make sure we can achieve those numbers. And then, as was referenced before on the stormwater, we're running about $250,000 underneath the funding that we thought we were going to be spending for some of the stormwater improvements. So that money is going to be available for this year to move forward and address some of the things that Andrea and Matt and Michael are working on. The one good thing is that we even saw an increase in year-to-date funds. So we actually saw funds go up about $2.6 million. Electric is accounting for about $1 million of that. We actually saw a $1.5 million increase in the water fund. So positive information going into this fiscal year, with it being a new budget year starting in July. We're starting in a good position. So the one thing that, operating cash flow and free cash flow and then kind of return on invested capital are probably three things we're going to monitor real closely to make sure that the funding levels are where they need to be. We've advanced the money from the electric fund for the stormwater system. We need to be diligent and responsible with that and be fiscally responsible because we don't really want to start addressing some of the stormwater needs and mitigating that risk and liability at the expense of the other systems. So kind of with those highlights within the board packet, you've got the financial statements. There's still some year-end stuff that we'll have to go through and verify, but those are good numbers and good performance. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions concerning the financial information.
That fund-to-fund transfer was how much again?
Originally was $1 million, and then we've got $1.5 million budgeted for this year. That's another item that we'll have to bring forward. James will have to draft the loan agreement between the two funds. So we'll get that adjusted and amended. We're kind of waiting to see what the bids look like on Martin Street before we do so. So that's kind of how that would go, Bill.
Is it a loan or is it just a fund-to-fund transfer?
No, it's a loan. It's where the whole intent when we finally get to a steady stream of revenue or funding source for the stormwater system, it'll be part of the payback
Okay.
to the electric fund would be the goal. So it's kind of a capital advancement underneath the loan arrangement,
Okay.
for that fund. So
Will it have to carry a rate of interest?
it does, and I can't remember, what was it, James, that was in that agreement?
It's
2%.
It's low, but it's equivalent to what we might have been able to get if we borrowed the money someplace else from a guaranteed fund. I mean, it's one of those things where you want to be fair with the other fund and pay some rate of interest, but it doesn't have to be something exorbitant. So,
Now, I think the contract actually read where the stormwater fund would have to pay a principal payment. We'll be having to adjust that and defer it as well. Will only be interest accumulation. So, but, yep, that's all I have for the finance report.
Okay. Old business. Jared, that would be you. You're first up in it.
As Matt spoke in his operations report, we are back in 2015. We put in a 5-year plan to close the loop from Oakwood to Southside Substation. I don't know. I think Bill has been. It was last year, right, Matthew? Yeah, last year, January of this year. You was on the board and we spoke to you about getting this done.
Yeah.
John and Bill Dees, our current construction right now in our electrical system, our sub-transmission loop is not a full loop. So basically what we have is the ability to backfeed with 2 single sources on 2 different ways. If we close in the loop, then we'll be able to self-heal, as they call, self-heal multiple ways and get power back on quickly, and then go out and assess the issue, and then fix the issue, and then go back to normal status. We originally budgeted $2.5 million for this design, and the project cost was estimated at $2.5 also. So this portion that I'm asking to get approved is the first step of getting our final line design, where we're going to go through town. Most of it's following current structures already, and this is just the surveying and the geotechnical. And MECO was a low bidder of $36,380, and that's who staff is recommending to. Excuse me?
I was just asking if the project was all above ground.
It is. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I'm asking the board to approve. Is that? Do you have any questions before you
need
approve?
any more information on this?
Did you have multiple bidders?
We did.
Okay. Could you provide us later? You don't have to do it now.
Sure, I can. I've got. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Do I hear a motion?
I don't have any questions. I haven't been here long enough to know whether the expenditure of 2 million to close that loop is something that is going to benefit everybody long-term, at least to that amount, but I'm assuming that it is.
Yeah, like I said, staff made a recommendation of this in 2015. We've talked about it for several years now. The biggest benefit to this is our ability to, as I said, to self-heal and to be able to bring people's power back on. Throughout Oakwood Substation, which is the substation right over here, is basically being fed by 2 different directions. If we have an issue, then we'll have us, Pillsbury, and our whole industrial section off until we get both issues resolved. So closing the loop is really a big step for us to be able to increase in reliability and power quality.
Cool. No, I don't have any.
A motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Your motion is passed, Jared.
Thank you, guys.
You're up, Matt.
What I got to present to you tonight, or this afternoon, is the design contract with Pepping Stone, Bach and Associates for the North Street Storm Sewer. Now that we know what parameters the Corps of Engineers, where their projects is going to start and stop, allows us to move forward with towards the replacement that was laid out before you November of 2018, when we talked about total replacement of that storm sewer from the levee up to the old bridge approach. Total project cost at that time was roughly $5.5 million. With the Corps picking up part of that project, that's going to lessen the cost. The remaining portion will also be, part of it may be eligible for FEMA reimbursement because it isn't under the failed portion of the disaster declaration of last year. So I got a contract is following here. It's for Pepping Stone, Bach and Associates to do the design, construction administration, anything but project daily inspections is included in this cost. And, hold on a second while I get to the page. I think it was what, 300?
392.
$392,000. So that's based upon percentages that are found common with engineering contracts of projects like this. And the way we do our engineering or professional services contracts, it's qualification-based selection. Originally, we sent out requests for qualifications. We ranked the qualifications that we received. At that time, we selected Pepping Stone, Bach and Associates as the engineering firm we saw best fit, best qualified for our stormwater projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been working with them since 2017. And based upon that selection process, as long as we're comfortable with them, we think they're doing a good job. We don't have to go back out for qualifications within a period of time. And so that's why we worked with them to come up with a scope that we were agreeable to. And then based upon that scope, a fee that we felt was appropriate for that level of effort. So, and that's what we've done here. So,
And that's based on the $5.5 million estimate?
actually, I think it's based off a revised estimate. I don't.
4.3.
4.3.
Yeah, we adjusted our estimate based on the course.
So we're looking at about 8%, 7 or 8%.
Now, is the 4.3 based on the fact that the Corps is taking some of that off the bus?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any more questions, fellas?
What was the time frame for design to be complete?
Our goal is to get permits submitted in 6 months, and then obviously we don't have a say on that, but our goal is to be ready to bid this thing out in 9 months.
Okay.
That's an aggressive goal, but that's our goal. A lot of it has to do with the first step is certainly coordinating with the Corps on their project and then getting that tied down. So,
Do they have to do their portion first?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'd like to be right in there with them, because there is, when it comes to the Corps taking what we call the Section 408 permit portion, which is what affects the levy. So if we're designing it and contracting and everything else, we'd have to have a flood protection plan put in place for that, obviously, because you're affecting the levy, to affect the people downtown. So while they're doing that, and we're tying into it, of course, at that box. Basically, what they've shown is having a junction box where they tie in. So right now, what they did in 92, 93, before the 93 flood, 92-ish, was when they transitioned from the box culvert to the stone, they just did it with a cast in place. So there's not a structure there to transition to. So the new plan, when they extend it out, is for them to put a structure there that we can then tie into and have access there. Because when the sluice gate's shut right now, you have no access in through there. So it'll give us more flexibility down the road for emergency actions.
I wonder what is it a long-term fix, and what would be long-term in that design? You know, as they do their portion, it seems to me that theirs is more critical than ours for negative impacts. The next big 97 flood.
Right.
You know,
So,
kind of issue.
you know, what part of this and what the full scope is, you know, the Corps did a lot of work on 93, and they basically just rehabbed the stone archway. Well, that's basically reached the end of its useful life. So now we have this old stone archway that, yes, they improved, but that's what failed. So now the question is, okay, if we approve 80 feet, you know, then that's just good until at 85 feet it fails. So then if you prove 100 feet, well then at 105 feet, you know, eventually fails. So this takes it up to a point which is actually above the levee, and ties into
The old
to another concrete structure that the highway department built, and that was the highway.
Plus another advantage to this proposed storm sewer is it gets it out from underneath a few houses. There are several houses there along North Street that are
Crazy.
right above it, and with it being an old box or laid up stone structure, the life of it, you know, continually running water through there, we don't want to take that liability. So,
Things they used to do.
Yeah.
so.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
So
Does this, oh, I'm sorry, I just had one question. Later on, we're looking at a further agreement, looking for a 3-year general engineering agreement that looks like an at-will type of agreement with Pepping Stone Bach and Associates. Does that have anything to do with approving this?
No.
Okay.
I can. That is more of a general agreement that if we need Michael to look at, you know, when we brought him in to look at North Street and come up with some cost estimates, that's how we worked with him
bit
there,
of a
because we
retainer
already
like
had the
you.
agreement in place.
Yeah.
When we have a specific scope, it gets its own scope and its own fee that is negotiated at the time, and then we bring that before you. So
That contract's based off of a lot of contracts that we have and other engineering firms have with other government entities. So it's an on-call, and it's written up for a 3-year period, and then if you want to extend it for another year, you know, or two, it's written to where you have the ability to do that. All you have to do is tell us that, hey, we want to extend this. So we talked a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now, you know, so maybe it makes sense to just extend that 12 months with everything going on. So
and at this point, it's not guaranteeing any money to PSBA. It's just allowing us, should the need arise, we can go out and work with Michael on.
I know it's more of a vendor qualification type agreement and pre-approved boilerplate,
Yep.
but I just didn't have an idea whether the two had any tie together or not. It didn't seem to me, but I just thought I needed to ask that.
Yep.
Yeah, first was there, I'll second, definitely.
Okay. All in favor?
All right.
That's approved, ma'am. And you're still up.
Thank you. Second thing to present is a contract with Kim Heck. It's a engineering firm that we use to help us with our pre-treatment program. Several years ago, we ran into trouble when we had an EPA inspection. They came in and dinged us pretty hard, and so at that time, we revamped the program. Jeff Williams, who's our current wastewater plant supervisor, was tabbed with running that department and working with Kim Cole, I think is her last name, or Kim Hoskins, on redeveloping that program. Since that time, she's continued to assist Jeff in pre-treatment inspections, verifying data provided to him, writing new permits. And so this is just a yearly contract agreement with her to continue to provide those services.
Ken, in your opinion, are a lot of those services typically contracted out?
You know, kind of like what you were talking about with the, the on-call contract. Yeah, a lot of times you'll go ahead and enter into, nomenclature for me would be a blanket agreement. You'd actually go out and do your professional selection process and choose your contractor and then put them under, just like what Michael was saying, a
I'm
three-year
just talking
agreement.
about the specific pretreatment contract. You're talking about the pretreatment by Kim HED or whatever the name of
Yep.
the company is?
But we definitely want to have a contract in place because it's a critical function, if that's what you're asking, John.
Yeah, I
mean,
just don't happen to
yeah.
know.
The thing of it is we're not a big enough community. We've got 5 right now. I think we've got 5 permitted industries, and so we don't do this frequent enough to be efficient at it. Kim does contract work with communities across the Midwest, and so she's exposed to this on a daily basis and can help lead us in the direction. We had a new permittee come on board. She was able to work with us rather quickly on development of that new permit because she worked with another community that has the same type of industry and knew what to look for. And where if we're doing that on our own, I mean, we don't deal with it and don't have the knowledge.
I didn't pick up from that it was specifically for industrial users.
Yes, sorry. Pretreatment program is industrial users. There's 2 categories. One's categorical. If it's defined by EPA as having to have pretreatment at the facility, such as certain metalworking, certain electroplating. Trying to think of some others. What's that? No. The new industry was. Dang it. It's where they paint it and put it in the oven. Powder coating. And so there are certain requirements based upon the materials that they use, and they have limits that they have to meet when it leaves that facility. Then there's another set of users because they're a large user, such as what General Mills falls under a permit with us for, because they're such a large user of water and a producer of sewer. Any impact they have on us is quite large. So we want to make sure we're able to control what they're providing to us so that we can meet our limits as we discharge water back to the river. So
It's the first time I read it. I thought it had to do with somebody on site looking at inflow coming into the
Nope.
whole thing. It's outflow from
it's outflow from those
Yeah, I know,
individual
yeah.
businesses. We do sampling of those businesses once a year. We recently changed ordinances to where they now have a 5-year permit cycle. Previously, it was a yearly permit cycle. We're doing inspections of them every year so that we look for potential violations. Stuff that doesn't have drains capped or has the ability to spill and enter our sewer system that would cause us a disruption to the plant. So,
Is one of those industries the hospital?
Nope.
Where do they send their effluent? Their own treatment?
No, they send it to us, but they don't fall under a pretreatment program. There's no categorical.
Well, they separately
Question
handle
with COVID
biohazards.
and blood downstream. Blood can be an issue, but it's a sidebar, sorry.
No, thanks for clearing that up.
Yep, no problem. Anytime you have questions about something I'm talking about, please ask. I'd rather you understand it. So.
Yeah.
Motion?
We're looking for an approval for that agreement?
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
I think you should go.
And the third contract I got to talk to you all about is the PSBA on-call contract. It would just be an extension of the previous agreement that was approved back in 2017 for an additional year. It's coming to the end of its 3-year term limit. So, and again, that's each project would have its own scope, its own fee that would be negotiated based upon what that surface would be at the time. So,
Motion to approve?
I read through it pretty
I'm
much,
sorry.
and it doesn't appear to make that agreement exclusive with them. If somebody else came along and had a bigger, better deal, shinier thing, we could go somewhere else instead of being compelled to use only Pepperstone Stone Bach.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is not, okay. I didn't see anything, any exclusivity in there, but I can see why you need the whole account set up, everything's already qualified, we understand terms before we start talking specifics, that makes sense. Yeah.
You made a motion?
No, second, sorry.
All approved? Or all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank y'all.
There you go, Matt.
Thank you.
Comments from James?
Yeah, I have no comments.
Okay. We'll take that.
Okay.
Okay. Bill, you want to do your thing?
The closed session pursuant to Section 610 of the Missouri Sunshine Law, the meeting shall convene in closed session to discuss litigation, real estate, and contracts, to include the board and
Mr. Dees, James,
Probably one.
Courtney,
You want
And
Courtney?
then myself and Matt.
Okay.
And you said,
And
Matt.
Matt.
and Matt.
You're all that? You get all that? Okay.
You need a second and vote on it.
Yep.
Take a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We will move into closed session. Thank you all for coming.